welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in December. So in terms of the number of books I read, December was my best reading month ever. I read a whopping 10 books in December, which is unheard of for me. Normally I read somewhere between 5 and 8 books. Like 8 is usually a lot for me. Once I read 9 books, but this month I read 10 somehow. I don't really know, especially because I was going through finals. I don't know. I mean, I did read, you know, a graphic novel, I read a poetry collection, so that's probably why. But anyways, I'm very proud of how much I read in December. So I am going to go through each book kind of quickly just because I don't want this video to be super long. But I did vlog throughout the entire month of December, so I have spoken about all of these books in at least one video, I think. So you can check those out if you want to know more about each of these books. But yeah, let's just get started because I have a feeling this will still be a long video. So the first book that I finished in December was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This was the Winers Book Club pick for November and it was actually my pick and I really loved this book. I ended up giving it 5 stars. This book follows 2 different timelines. One of the timelines you're following is from the 1700s and you're following this woman who owns this apothecary shop, but one thing about it is that several women know that this apothecary actually can supply poisons for these women to give out to the men in their lives who are abusing them or something else. And so this woman is just trying to help like the battered women in the area. I think it's in London, England, I think. And there's also a young girl that you're following who wants to help out this apothecary owner. And then you're following the present timeline. This woman recently found out her husband is cheating on her and she goes on their 10th anniversary trip by herself to, I'm pretty sure it's London, and ends up discovering this apothecary and is trying to figure out more about it. So you're following these 2 different timelines and listen, is this a perfect book? No, but it was exactly what I wanted to read at that moment. I flew through this book. Like, there was no part of this book where I thought it was boring or where I thought it dragged. I just found it really interesting and I just loved the vibes of the book. So like I said, I know it's not perfect. Most of the whiners didn't like it, but I loved it obviously. So I gave it 5 stars. Does it deserve it? I don't know, but it's what I gave it in the moment and I just had a great time reading this book. So if you're looking for like a fun historical fiction, I would really recommend it. I will say that there are trigger warnings in this book for miscarriage, sexual assault, and cheating. So just keep that in mind before you pick it up, but I really liked it, so there you go. I just think it's neat. The next book I read in December, I just realized I don't think I ever spoke about this in one of the vlogs that I did. Maybe I did, but I don't think I did, and that's probably just because I didn't love this book, and that is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, I think is the author. And this is a middle grade that is really beloved. Like, almost everyone I know who has read this book has loved it, so I don't know what happened with me, but you're following this town where every year they sacrifice a baby into the woods for the witch who supposedly lives in the woods so that she won't attack their town. And then every year the witch who lives in the woods comes to rescue this baby that this town has left in the woods, and she doesn't understand why they keep leaving babies in the woods. So there's clearly a misunderstanding. So she always rescues these babies and gives them to a family in need who will raise them well, and she always gives these babies sunlight to make sure they're healthy and everything like that. But she accidentally gives one baby moonlight, which gives her magical powers. So the witch is like, well, maybe I'll raise this baby myself. So she ends up doing that, and you're following the baby that grows up with powers. You're following the witch, and there's some other kooky characters in there, and you're also following the, you know, the town who hates this witch. And I don't know, I thought this book was really boring. Like, first of all, I will say the audiobook was really good. The narrator did like such an amazing job doing the voices of all the different characters. So I will say if you are interested in this book, maybe check out the audiobook because it was really good. But I just found the story really boring and I just didn't really care about anything that was going on. And I know a lot of people who read this cried at the end and I was like, I didn't really feel anything, which might be pretty bad. But my main thing with this book is that it was boring. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was great. It was just very middle of the road. So I did give it 3 stars because, like I said, I just don't feel too strongly about this book. And I mean, it's been like over a month now since I finished it and I really cannot tell you much about it. So yeah, unfortunately this was kind of a miss for me. The next book I read in December is one of my favorite books of the year, one of my favorite books of all time, honestly. It might be my favorite romance book, but I can't officially say that yet, but that is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. This book means so much to me, I cannot even express how much I love this book to you, and I need everyone to go read it because it is definitely underhyped. But this book follows these two characters, Dev and Charlie. Dev is a producer on this Bachelor type show called Ever After, except instead of the Bachelor you have Prince Charming and all the girls are his princesses, and it's very like fairy tale themed. And Dev is a hopeless romantic and has always believed in the show and believes that two random people can truly fall in love on the show, and is hoping for a great love like that in his life, but he has recently gone through a breakup, so that is weighing heavily on him. And then you're also following Charlie, who is this season's Prince Charming, and he is a nervous wreck. He suffers from severe anxiety and panic attacks, and Dev is assigned to be his handler for the season. And so they kind of strike up this unlikely friendship because Charlie seems very resistant to be on the show. Like every time the cameras roll, he just starts panicking. And I related to Charlie so much. The way that his anxiety is spoken about in this book, it was like the author just went into my mind and was like, let's take Darian's brain and put it in Charlie, and there we have a character. Like, oh my god. He also suffers from OCD, and I thought all of this rep was just so amazing to see. Charlie is also struggling with his sexuality throughout the book. He has never been in a serious relationship, so he's not really sure if he is even interested in women or if he's gay, but he's also questioning whether he might be asexual. And the discussion of asexuality in this book was so great. There was one character who was trying to talk to Charlie about whether or not he might be asexual, and like she just spoke about it in a way that I don't think I've ever seen in a book before. Like she was like, okay, well, asexuality is a spectrum, and you have demisexuality and gray sexuality, and there's more within the asexuality umbrella. And I was like, oh my god, like it just made me so happy to see. And then we have Dev, who is suffering with depression, and again, it's like the author went into my brain and was like, let's take this part of Darian's brain and put it in this character. I remember there was a very specific point where they were discussing Dev's depression, and like it made me sob because of how much I related to it. So this book just meant so much to me. The romance is very cute. Obviously the romance is between Dev and Charlie, and I loved their romance so much. And also, like, I find with romance it's very hit or miss when it comes to the third act breakup, because that happens in every single romance. We know it's coming, and sometimes there's a huge misunderstanding and it's for a really stupid reason. But in this book I found it very believable with what happened, and these characters just felt so real. So what ends up happening between them seemed like very natural. Like it was like, okay, yeah, like I understand how this could happen, blah blah blah. So I don't know, I just loved this book so much. Like I said, it's one of my favorite books of the year, and I gave it 5 stars, and I highly recommend it to everyone. Just please read it. It does discuss heavily, like I said, anxiety and depression. So if those are triggers for you, like maybe be careful going into this, because it does go into detail. So yeah, keep that in mind before going into this book. There is also homophobia in this book, so just keep those in mind before going into it. But I love this book so much. It's 5 stars, obviously. One of my favorites of the year, and just please read it. Oh my god. It's so good. Next, I reread a favorite, and that was One Day in December by Josie Silver. I read this every December. This was my 3rd reread of this book. Or no, it was my 3rd read, my 2nd reread. That makes sense, right? Yeah. And this book follows these two characters, Jack and Lori, and 10 years ago they locked eyes with each other while Lori was on a bus and Jack was at the bus stop, and he runs to the bus to try to get on to meet her, but he just misses it. And then for the next year, Lori is looking for her busboy, cannot find him, until one day her best friend Sarah introduces Lori to her new boyfriend, who happens to be Jack, the busboy. So obviously this kind of creates a complicated relationship between the three of them, and I know why this book is not for everyone, okay? I know that, but it is for me. I love it. I can not ignore like all the problems with this book, but I can just take it at face value and love it for what it is. Would I want to be in this situation in real life? Obviously not. I will say there is cheating in this book, so if that really bothers you, maybe don't read this. But oh, there's also death of a parent and the mention of a death of a sibling, so keep those in mind. But I just think it's such a fun story, and the audiobook gives me such comfort, because the first time I listened to this book I was going through a lot in my life, and I remember it gave me a lot of comfort then, and so listening to it now just gives me a lot of comfort. And I read it physically for the first time while I listened to it, and I just love this book so much. It just means a lot to me, and I can't wait to just keep rereading it every December. Like, it just puts me in a great, like, this book isn't really Christmassy, I would say, but it just puts me in the Christmas mood because I read it every December, you know? So I don't know, I feel like I'm squinting a lot all of a sudden. I'm sorry, but I just really love this book, so there you go. The next book I read, I was so excited when I got my copy in the mail, and I got it before it even came out, so I was very lucky. But that is Heartstopper Volume 4. First of all, this cover is probably my favorite cover. I think it's my favorite cover of all the Heartstopper books. So if you don't know, this is a graphic novel by Alice Oseman, and this is the 4th volume in the series. Obviously it's Heartstopper Volume 4. We get it. And the first volume follows these 2 boys, Nick and Charlie, and I always mix them up. Charlie is openly gay at his school, but the year before I think he dealt with a lot of homophobia at his school, so he kind of keeps his sexuality more private now. Then he meets Nick, who they become friends really quickly, and then Charlie starts to develop a crush on Nick, and Nick is starting to develop feelings for Charlie also, but Nick his whole life has thought he is straight, so he is very confused about his own feelings and what is going on, and it just follows their relationship from there. And oh my god. First of all, I think this is definitely the best volume in the series so far. So if you have read the series, the 3rd volume starts to discuss an eating disorder with Charlie, and I love the way that it was handled. So it is a very like fluffy series, but it also discusses hard topics like this, and this book really went into it. It discussed eating disorders and self-harm, and it just was such a beautiful story because it really focused on the fact that just because you're in love does not mean like you don't suffer any mental health problems. Like just because Nick and Charlie are in love, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the series, they fall in love. Oh my gosh. Like it really focused on the fact that even though Nick is in love with Charlie, like he can't fix his problems. All they can really do is be there and support him. But I really love that because I find in like movies and TV shows and books, like if a character is really dealing with their mental health and then they like meet another character and they fall in love and then they're happy for the rest of their life, like that's really not how it goes in real life. So I really love how it focused on obviously Charlie going through all of this, but also Nick and how he can support Charlie and how he feels like he wants to just fix him but he can't, obviously. And I thought it was so beautiful. It definitely made me cry. Like, oh my god. So if topics like eating disorders and self-harm are a trigger for you, maybe stay away from this volume in particular because it does talk about it quite a lot. It is pretty much the focus of this volume, but obviously it does focus on happier things and of their love story. And there's a new dog in this book also. Nellie gets a little brother, I think. I think it's a boy. I don't remember. Anyways, it's just great. I love it so much, and the 5th volume is gonna be the last one and I'm so sad, but also I just if you haven't read these graphic novels yet, I highly recommend them. Pick them up. They're just so good. And obviously this was 5 stars. So we had a 5-star, and then the next book I read was a 1-star, and that was Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. This book was not good. I've talked about my feelings about this book in I think 3 different videos now. I did read this for my booktube showdown video that I did, so I'll leave that linked up above if you guys want to check that out because I did read this for a specific reason and I hated it. So this book follows this woman named Bernadette, and at the beginning of the book you find out that she has gone missing, and so the narrator of the book is her daughter B, and she is basically telling the story of Bernadette leading up to her going missing, and she kind of has compiled these emails, both like sent from Bernadette and also emails between these moms that are about Bernadette, and they live in a very like suburban town where there's lots of mom drama, and I just hated this book so much. I really don't want to talk about it more than I need to. I really hated the way this was written, and it was written in 2012, and there's a lot of casually racist comments in this book. There was a lot of hate towards Canadians in this book, which was very unnecessary, and it wasn't good. I don't think it was good. It was supposed to be funny, like this is a comedy, an uproarious comedy of manners, it says. Divinely funny, like what? I did not laugh once in this book, except sometimes I would laugh like in pain, like I'd be like you know when you do that when you read a bad book. So I gave this 1 star. I really don't want to talk about it anymore. Also check out my worst books of the year video because this was in there. The worst book I think I've ever read, so I'm never gonna look at this again. Okay. Next, I read a much better book. I listened to this book in one sitting, and that was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this book is a very simple premise. It's only, I think it's less than 200 pages, but you're following this woman. She is in her 30s and she has worked at the same convenience store for the past 18 years, and she's very content with her life. She doesn't really want more for herself, even though her family has been pressuring her to find a better job and move up in the ranks or find a husband. This takes place in Japan, by the way. It is a translated unexpected book, and she just doesn't really want that for herself. She never was interested in having a partner. She was never interested in finding a quote-unquote better job for herself. Like, she's very good at her job, and it's just what she wants to do. And I mean, I can't really explain more of the plot than that because it is so short, but some things start to happen that affect her life and her job, and I just thought this was such an interesting book. Like, it is definitely a character study of this one woman, and I found I related a lot to her because I am very much like the type of person who, if I'm in a situation that like I'm content in, and like if I'm in a job that I'm good at, I have no interest in like rising up the ranks or anything like that. Like, I am perfectly fine staying where I am. Like, if I'm happy, then that's fine. So I really related to her, and there was such an interesting discussion between, like, especially being a woman and like specifically being a woman in Japan, which I obviously couldn't relate to, but it was a very interesting discussion on how you are expected to, like I said, constantly be moving up the ranks, constantly be looking for like a better life for yourself and looking for a husband and starting a family. And one thing I really appreciated in this book, it was such a small moment, but obviously I noticed it, but there's a point where she's talking with like two of her friends, I think, and they're talking about how like she has never been in a relationship and how she doesn't really want. Okay, I had to change my battery, so apologies if the angle is a bit different, but as I was saying, her friends are discussing how she's never been in a relationship, how she's not really looking for a husband. One of them mentions that maybe she's asexual and she heard of this term recently. I was preparing myself for them to be like, asexual, what is that? Like, who wouldn't want a husband or something like that? But they had like a very quick but very like thoughtful discussion about it. Like, one of them was like, you know, I heard that it's very hard for them to come out because everyone expects them to want to have sex, but you know, for them, like, it's often not what they want. And like, it was very quick, but I really appreciated it, and I don't know if the author is asexual or not, but I just really appreciated that, how like I was just getting ready for them to be like I was ready to fight. I was getting ready for them to be like asexual, what is that? That's not even real, because I'm so used to hearing that in like popular media and stuff, but I don't know, I just really appreciated that. Also, there's a lot of conversation about how the main character in this book is coded as autistic, and I'm quite sure the author herself is also autistic, so I would definitely agree that she is probably coded as autistic. I thought that was also definitely a very interesting element to the book, and I just had a great time listening to this. Like, it's just a very quick read, but it packs a punch. Like, I've been thinking about it since I finished it, so I gave this book 4 stars, and I really want to read Earthlings by this author. I've heard that book is pretty crazy, pretty unhinged, but I still want to read it, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading more from this author. Okay, this next book I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on because I think I've mentioned this in 4 different videos. I mentioned it in one of my vlogs, I mentioned it in my 24-hour readathon video, I mentioned it in my worst books of the year video, and we had a live show about it because this was our December pick for the Whiners, but that was The 12 Dates of Christmas by Jenny Bayliss. This book was just not for me. I gave it 2 stars. You're following this woman who is in her 30s. She's recently returned to her small hometown and signs up for this thing called the 12 Dates of Christmas, where you get set up with 12 different dates. You try to hit it off with one of them, obviously, and you follow her on these dates. All the men had 2 different types of personalities. Either the dates would go well, but then the man would realize that he was in love with his ex, or we found out the man was just in it for sex and that was it. That's all the dates were. She ends up with her best friend, who you know that's gonna happen from the start. That's not a spoiler. And her best friend was really whiny and I hated him. So that's really all I have to say. I definitely wouldn't recommend reading this. I know it's like a cute Christmas romance with a cute cover, but I don't recommend it. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, there's all those videos where I talked about it, but I don't want to talk about this book anymore, so that's all you're getting. Next was another book that I read for that BookTube Showdown video, and that was September Love by Lang Leave. This is a poetry collection, and this is actually my first, I think, my first poetry collection that I've ever read, and I really loved this. I didn't know what to expect because I've never been a huge fan of poetry, but I do like reading books that are written in verse, so I went into this with a very open mind and I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of the poems actually really hit me. A lot of the poems were about love and isolation and loneliness and like a lost love, specifically after a breakup, so that obviously hit me a lot. And there were a lot of poems about writing, which I couldn't relate to as much, but obviously with a poetry collection I assumed that I wouldn't relate to every single poem, but I really love this. And if you're just getting into poetry, maybe check this one out, because I like I said, I'm not a poetry connoisseur or anything, but I don't know, I really loved it. I thought it was written really well and I really wanted on to look up more of Lang Leave's works. So I gave this 4.5 stars and I really loved it. That's all I really have to say. And then the last book that I read in December, which was also the last book I finished in 2021, was The Bear and the Nightingale, which does mean that I read one more book for that 21 books to read in 2021 video that I did, and I reacted to it, and I said there was still a chance I might read this before the end of the year. Well, fellas, I did it. I read this during the 24-hour readathon I did with Lisa and Casey, and again, for my full thoughts, you can check out that video. I read this all in one day, and I think that kind of hindered my enjoyment of this book because I just felt very confused for most of this book, and I really don't know how to explain what this is about, so I'll read you a bit of the synopsis, but I will say try to avoid like reading the full synopsis before going into this book, because I find the synopsis gives away too much, but I'll read part of it. So it says, winter lasts most of the year at the edge of the Russian wilderness, and in the long nights Vasilisa, I think that's how you say it, and her siblings love to gather by the fire to listen to their nurse's fairy tales. Above all, Vasya loves the story of Frost, the blue-eyed winter demon. Wise Russians fear him, for he claims unwary souls, and they honor the spirits that protect their homes from evil. Then Vasya's widowed father brings home a new wife from Moscow. Fiercely devout, Vasya's stepmother forbids her family from honoring their household spirits, but Vasya fears what this may bring, and indeed, misfortune begins to stalk the village. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't think you should read more of the synopsis than that, but yeah, I don't know, like, I found I just disconnected with the writing style a lot. Like, it was definitely written very beautifully, and it was definitely very atmospheric. Like, winter is definitely the perfect time to read this book because you're in the Russian wilderness where it's winter all the time, basically. So, I don't know, it's hard to explain, like, why this didn't completely work for me, and as I was reading it, I was like, I can tell this is a good book, it's just not working for me, and I don't really know how to explain why. I liked our main character. I did find there were too many characters, and I kept getting them mixed up, and also like a lot of the characters also went by different nicknames, so I just like sometimes they would be talking about someone and I was like, who are we talking about? That could have been just my own issue and the fact that I was pretty tired when I read this, so I don't know if I want to continue the series or not. Maybe I'll reread this one day and see if I like it better upon reread when I'm not super tired, but I did give this 3 stars because while I didn't like completely enjoy it, I could recognize this as a good book, so I didn't think it would be fair to rate it lower than that. But this was kind of disappointing to end the year on. This was also a 5-star prediction for me, so I'm really sad that I didn't love this as much as I thought I would, but there you go, 3 stars. It's beautiful though, so at least it's that. So those are the 10 books that I read in December. I'm sorry I kind of flew through all of them, but I really didn't want this video to be longer than it had to be. So like I said, I talked about all of these books in different videos, so you can check those out if you want to know more of my thoughts. But yeah, let me know what was your favorite book you read in December, or what was the last book you read in 2021? Was it good? Was it disappointing? Let me know. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!